Well, good evening. I'm George Kilpatrick. Welcome to the United Democrats of Onondaga County. And our guest tonight is Dana Balter. She's seeking the 24th Congressional District seat. Of course, the 24th Congressional District covers all of Onondaga County, Wayne County, part of Oswego County, and all of Cayuga County. It's a big election year. There's a lot at stake, especially for Democrats, an opportunity to flip the House, if you will. And so we want to find out, and of course a lot in the news today, of course Brett Kavanaugh confirmed as Supreme Court Justice over the weekend, a lot going on. And so if you have a question or comment at any point during our interview with Dana Balter tonight, please, right below here, enter your comments, and we'd love to hear from you about what you think about the direction of the 24th Congressional District. And let's start with something you were talking about just today, the debate schedule. You're trying to get debates with your opponent, and you guys haven't completely negotiated what you have, what you want, and what you want, two different things. Less than a month to go to the election on November the 6th. So what's the beef here?
So the congressman and I have different views on what a debate schedule should look like. What he has agreed to do is 4 debates, all here in the city of Syracuse in the last 10 days of the election. 3 on television, 1 with the Post Standard to be streamed on Facebook, in closed studios, pre-recorded. What I have asked for is a larger series of debates. I've agreed to those, but I want more debates. I want us to debate in every county, because I think it's very important that we speak to the concerns of people all across this district, and we're going to get asked different questions in Wayne County than we are in Onondaga County. I've asked for some debates to be in front of live audiences, because I think it is incredibly important that the voters get to participate in this process. And I've asked for debates to start earlier. I actually wanted to start them last week at the beginning of October, because I think voters need more time to look at us side by side, assess the differences, and make informed choices about who they're going to vote for. The congressman has refused any of those requests, all of those requests, and it's sort of, well, it's very disappointing, but it's also surprising, given that when he ran against Dan Maffei in 2014, he was making the same demands of Dan Maffei. He was, criticizing Dan for not debating in all 4 counties, for not debating in front of live audiences.
Deja vu all over again.
It's remarkable. If you go back and read the quotes, it's as though I said them yesterday, but in fact they came out of Katko's mouth. So we are trying to get him to agree to debate earlier. Congress is out of session. He has been home
That
since
was one
the
of
beginning
the
of the
concerns earlier, right? That there would
was.
be concern about whether there would be congressional business, but
right.
there isn't.
There isn't. They were scheduled originally to work until through the middle of the month, although they did know in advance that they would be recessed early so that candidates could come home and campaign. And all of the members have been out of session since the end of September. So that excuse has evaporated. I'm not sure what reason he's giving at this point, but he still refuses to debate any earlier or in any other county or in front of a live audience.
Would you settle for one debate out that's not pre-recorded in front of a live audience? At least one.
Well, look, I want a handful,
right.
But I think anything we can do to open up this debate process to engage more people is going to be great. And so I'm hopeful that he'll agree to something.
Do voters have a say? I mean, can they? What is there a suggestion that what impact can the voters in the 24th Congressional District have? I mean,
well,
you certainly hope that there's a bigger.
I mean, look,
issue.
I think that what this whole election is recognizing your impact as a voter, right? And so I think whatever the issue is that you care about, whether it's earlier debates or something else, you should be raising your voice to anybody who has the power to make a difference. In this case, that would be TV stations and radio stations and newspapers and John Katko's campaign. Maybe if he sees that there are a lot of voters who really want him to do this, maybe he'll be willing to. I don't know. He's not willing to do it just because I ask him, but maybe if the voters do, he will.
Got a question from Mary Elizabeth Whittington. She wants to know, your stance on renaming Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day.
I don't, it's not something I've thought about, to be honest with you. I don't have a stance on it. I certainly think it's something that we should be talking about, because I think that there's a lot of pain and difficult history associated with Columbus Day, especially in this place where we live side by side with the Onondaga Nation, where we live in their sacred lands, and I think that it's something we need to talk about as a community.
You know, it's interesting. It seems to be a conversation about how do you not take away what people perceive as something representing Italian heritage, but at the same time represent the indigenous peoples on whose land we sit.
And I think this is just one example of some of the really difficult conversations we have to have as a country. We see this sort of issue come up again and again, and how can we make sure that we are honoring everyone's experience without erasing anyone's experience? And that's part of the challenge of living in a plural society. But I think that when we open up and engage in conversation about things like that, we end up a better community and a better country.
Some cities have done it, though. I mean, I guess it's not your call as a congressional representative, but some cities have actually renamed the day. I think Seattle's one of them, and I think it was Columbus decided that they were going to honor veterans on Columbus Day. So on the observed Columbus Day, let me say it that way. It was interesting. I was looking for something to post, and I found a great image to post as well. Hey, your questions, just like Mary did, for Dana Balter, candidate for the 24th Congressional District. Another issue, I'm thinking about what happened over this weekend. Meaning Brett Kavanaugh confirmed as a Supreme Court Justice, meaning now that there's a conservative tilt on the court. Describe your feeling about that and what that means, if you will, for women who say that their issues have not been taken seriously. And men too, for that matter.
Yeah, I find the entire process with Kavanaugh's confirmation very disturbing. Certainly we have to deal with these allegations of sexual assault, which we need to take very seriously. I know that the Judiciary Committee said that they took it seriously and they heard some testimony. I think in a lot of ways they paid lip service to the process. I think the FBI investigation was a sham. We see lots of evidence of that. But my concern about Kavanaugh as a candidate goes beyond the sexual assault issues. I think we saw a lot of things during his confirmation process that under normal circumstances would disqualify him as a Supreme Court Justice, and should have disqualified him to be a Supreme Court Justice. One thing that concerned me very much was the temperament that he displayed. Judicial temperament is a very important thing, and he engaged in partisan ranting. He was unable to control his anger and his emotions. And as a judge, never mind a Supreme Court Justice, but just as a judge, those are incredibly important things. On top of that, we saw evidence that he lied about many things during his testimony. Things that there was not even any need to lie about, right? Very sort of simple things for which we have obvious evidence, like things that he wrote in his yearbook. And that is of great concern to me. And never before have we seen the GOP sort of make excuses for things like that or pretend that they don't matter. And they had lots of other choices to fill this seat who were conservative and represent the ideology that they want to see on the court. They did not need to stand by this nominee, and the way this process went down, the withholding of his public records, all pieces of this, I think, were really awful.
It's safe to say that it doesn't really matter. It didn't matter what the process was going to be. Democrats didn't have the votes. And so here's my concern. It's not about me. It's about the viewers. But my concern is we cry foul, but there's nothing to back it up. And maybe am I too harsh there? In other words, a lot of, the president has basically said, you're either for me or against me. And we heard that before. And isn't really trying to be president of the United States. He's trying to be president of the red states. I guess that's editorial. Forgive me.
I think it's, it's a real challenge, right? When you are in the minority, your power is limited. And I think, I don't know what the best way for Senate Democrats to approach this process would have been, but I think we can't ever give up or give in to a process that violates some of the most fundamental things about how our democracy is supposed to work. And things like, the Senate's role is to advise and consent. They can't do that if the records are withheld. That alone means that confirmation process never should have started. Democrats and Republicans and the public should have had the opportunity to see the records of this man before the confirmation process started. And we as Democrats have to keep talking about those things, even if we can't shape the outcome.
How about this? There's some conversation around impeaching Judge Kavanaugh. Is that a nuclear option? Is that an option you think should be on the table?
I have no idea. I think there are so many other things that we need to be focused on right now, that we need to be doing. I think that Mitch McConnell and his fellow leaders in the GOP have done so much to undermine the norms by which the Senate used to operate. And we have to repair some of those things, because it does damage to our entire political process. It does damage to the voters' faith in government. It does damage to our ability to get things done in a bipartisan way, which is so important, because our government can't just represent the people who agree with whoever's in power. Our government has to represent the entire country. And right now, what we're seeing happen in Congress goes in exactly the opposite direction.
I'm going to stay on that Kavanaugh thing for a moment, because we had a question from Charlie who said, how do you feel about amending the Constitution so that people can vote for Supreme Court justice in the same way as we do New York State? Should voters elect a Supreme Court justice instead of the Senate?
I have not heard this proposal before. I think that one of the things that has become clear over the last couple of years is that some of the structures of our government and our democracy are not working as well as we need them to. I think that there are people who are far smarter than I am, who know far more about the Constitution and the structures of government, that need to look at what kinds of changes, if any, we should make. And that's not something that I would decide off the cuff here as I'm sitting at the table talking to you. A question like that requires a great deal of research and investigation. But I do think that we need to work on restoring the health of all three branches of our government.
Which a lot of people are really concerned about. Jackson wants to know, given that Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi paid $1 million with TV commercials in support of you, is she now also planning on backing Pelosi in her bid for Speaker of the House?
So I have been asked this question since the beginning of my campaign. My answer has not changed. I look at any election, regardless of what it's for, as an opportunity to evaluate the candidates who are running and choose the candidate who I think will do the best job. When it comes to Speaker of the House, that means providing leadership in Washington. That means putting forward a legislative agenda that I think is going to benefit the people of Central and Western New York, who I hope to be representing. I don't know yet who's running for that office, and I will make that decision when I see who the candidates are.
By the way, if you have a question for Dana Balter, Dana is, of course, a candidate for the 24th Congressional District. But if you're in this forum, you already know that. You can get your question answered, and as you can see, there's no question that's off limits. So get your questions in before we end this conversation. And you said in a recent Facebook post, you talked about the Violence Against Women Act. Now, you know, that's very personal to me, right? Because of the work that I do in ending domestic violence. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and the Congress has not reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. And you took issue with your opponent around the symbolism of what was your concern there?
So my concern is that John Katko hasn't done anything about this. He has not worked to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. In fact, a few weeks back, he was asked in an interview, I can't remember what the press outlet was, about the Violence Against Women Act because it was going to expire at the end of September. And what he indicated to the reporter was that he hadn't heard anything about it, didn't really know about it. And then, very soon after that reporter asked him the question, he came out publicly and said, I want the act to be reauthorized. So it took, first of all, a reporter asking him to get him interested in the topic. And what he did was hold a press conference at Vera House where he said, I think this act needs to be reauthorized. Yet, he has done nothing to reauthorize it. He has not sponsored a piece of legislation. He hasn't offered a new piece of legislation. There is a piece of legislation currently that has been proposed that has, I believe, 163 Democratic co-sponsors that provides for a 5-year reauthorization of the bill. John Katko has not supported that. And he wrote a letter to Paul Ryan saying we need to reauthorize the bill. It was signed by a few dozen Republican
bipartisan,
members.
Right? Yeah.
And no, I believe this came just from Republican members
from the Republicans, right?
to their leadership.
That's right.
And my thought is, if you really want to do this, if you really want a 5-year authorization, and you have all these Republicans with you, why not sign on to the Democratic bill? That would be a true sign of bipartisanship. Bring those Republicans with you to the table, and if you bring all of those Republicans, you can probably get some concessions from the Democrats, and the bill will be more to your liking. That would be a demonstration of real commitment to helping women, to reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, and to working in a bipartisan way. All of those things are things John Katko claims to do, and yet when he has the opportunity to put his money where his mouth is, so to speak, he doesn't do it. And instead, he holds a photo op press conference, essentially using Vera House as a prop, which I find offensive.
In fact, the VAWA temporary legislation will expire at the end of December, so this is real time. There needs to be action on this bill.
And how much more evidence in our daily lives do we need of how important this issue is? The country is consumed right now with conversations about sexual assault and violence against women. And we can see from what those public conversations are that we still have a long way to go. I can't tell you the number of people I have heard over the last 2 weeks say things like, she's lying, she's not telling the truth, he would never do that. It is so obvious that we have so much work to do here, and the very least that we can do is keep in place the measures that we already have that are helping keep the women in our communities safe.
That's a really important issue, and of course it's also an important issue for men to take a leadership role in. And I wanted to bring that up because I know that that's an issue that you really are concerned about. Port of Oswego, a lot of money going into the Port of Oswego, or at least they're looking at what the investment has been. What can Congress do to help further development there?
Well, I think we've got a couple of sort of primary roles as members of Congress to do. One is to advocate, right? Keep the issues on the agenda, and the other is to bring resources home. And I think the Port of Oswego is one of many places in our district where we really need to invest to both revitalize our economy and rebuild our infrastructure, improve our infrastructure, which, by the way, is a great way to revitalize our economy.
Right.
And so, I think the job, what I would want to do in Congress is make sure that as we are talking about investment policies, as we're talking about infrastructure bills, that I'm using a megaphone to shout for Oswego and Syracuse and all of the places here at home who really need those investments, and make sure that we're getting what we need, and we are doing it in a way that actually does help revitalize our communities. So as we are building, we are including local hires, and we're using environmentally sustainable practices, and making sure that we're doing all of this with overall economic development and growth in mind.
One of the positions that you've taken is a concern over healthcare.
Yes.
In our community, and with Kavanaugh on the court, certainly there's concerns about further gutting of the Affordable Care Act. How do we guarantee? How do you guarantee that there's going to be health care?
So this is one of the issues that on day one in Congress I want to be working on. I think there really are few things, if any, that are more important to our country and to our people. And it's not just the Supreme Court that potentially will put this at risk. We are seeing a court case in Texas right now that has been filed on behalf of 20 GOP-controlled states, where they are now trying to dismantle the rest of the ACA because John Katko and his colleagues voted for the tax bill, and in that tax bill they took away the individual mandate. This lawsuit now says the rest of the bill is no good and it needs to go because of that tax vote. So they are now threatening coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. They are threatening the ability to stay on your parents' insurance until you're 26. They are threatening the prohibition against discriminating against women and charging them more for health care just because they're women. They're threatening the ban on lifetime caps. So babies who are born and spend the first months of their lives in the NICU could go back to running out of insurance before they even get home from the hospital. These are very serious threats to all of us, and we are facing them because of John Katko's vote on the tax bill.
Because of his yes vote on the tax bill.
Yes, because of his yes vote. I am hopeful, as I always am, that we will prevail and that we'll win that lawsuit. It will surely make its way up through the court system and eventually will get to the Supreme Court, and that's one of many things that Brett Kavanaugh has the possibility of undoing for us. But we have got to fight, and I think it's why we need to make healthcare a legislative priority in the next Congress.
You got a lot of people checking in. United Democrats of Onondaga County, Dana Balter, our guest tonight, and your questions while we have, not much time left. So light up the Facebook live here on Monday night, October the 8th. And Julie wants to know, do you condone CNY Solidarity Coalition's protest of the workers at Lockheed Martin?
So I wasn't there, and so I don't know what happened there. What I do know was that the protest was not of the workers at Lockheed Martin. The protest was of the practice on the part of the corporation, their involvement in selling weapons that were used to bomb children in Yemen. And those are two very different things. Unfortunately, John Katko has decided to conflate them and suggest somehow that I don't support the working men and women of Central New York, which is ridiculous. Of course I do. And one of the things that I want to work to do in Congress is make sure that we have the right conditions here in our region so that lots more good jobs come for people. That is not what was being protested there.
That was from Julia. Libby wants to know, if you are elected to Congress, will you continue to take PhD classes?
I will not. First of all, I don't take PhD classes anymore. I finished classes a long time ago. I do still have potentially a dissertation to finish.
So are you ABD?
But if I am ABD,
okay.
Yes. But if I'm serving in Congress, I will not be working on that because I will be working to serve the people of the 24th District in Congress.
Let's talk about reforming the criminal justice system. Certainly a concern that many people have in this district as well. What's your position?
I think that our criminal justice system needs a lot of work. And one of the things that we need to focus on is reforming what happens inside of our prisons. We need to provide better mental health care and job training services in prison so that when people come out of prison, they're ready to successfully reintegrate into their communities. But we also need to stop putting so many people in prison. We have a mass incarceration problem in this country. We incarcerate a higher percentage of our population than any other country in the world. And we have to change that. One of the things that we need to do is stop putting people in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. That alone will make a huge difference in the size of our prison population. We've learned from decades of fighting a war on drugs that we don't solve a drug problem with jail. Drug addiction is a medical problem, and we need to treat it as a medical problem. And so there are other ways to help people combat their drug use disorders and become productive members of society again.
How important is it, Dana, and maybe this is a rhetorical question, but for Democrats to take the House and for you to get elected in this district?
I think it's incredibly important. We are seeing things put at risk in our country right now that certainly in my lifetime we never have. This election is about more than just differences on policy. We have lots of differences on policy, I want to be clear about that. But there is more than that at stake. We are seeing an administration that is threatening some of the very fundamental institutions of our democracy, attacking our free press, attacking our independent judiciary, attacking our intelligence.
Attacking everything.
That is not healthy for democracy. It puts us all at risk. And I think one of the things that to me has been the most shocking about what's happened since Donald Trump took office is the GOP Congress's complete abdication of their responsibility to serve as a check on the presidency. That is one of the most important functions that Congress serves, and this Congress isn't doing it. And it is clear to me after all of this time that the only way we can reinstate that function of Congress is for Democrats to take control of the House.
This always comes up when we're here together, but this is about the legalization of marijuana in New York.
Yes.
What is your rationale for support or not?
So I do support the legalization of marijuana for a number of reasons. First of all, I have met countless people who need marijuana as a medical treatment. It is particularly helpful for treating pain. The treatment of pain is one of the things that got us into the opioid crisis that we're facing now. Medical marijuana is an excellent therapy for pain management, and it does not have the problems attached to it that opioid use does. So that's one reason. We also have a huge economic opportunity with the legalization of marijuana. If we tax it and regulate it, it has the potential to generate great revenue for the state, and that helps us invest in things like high quality schools and roads that we desperately need.
Why should people elect you?
They should elect me because I am going to fight for all the things that we've talked about, because I am committed to representing Central and Western New York values in Washington, D.C. And I will be a representative who, like the candidate that I am, will be constantly engaged with our community. My commitment is to show up and listen and stand up for you in Washington. And that's what we need in a representative. I will be that person.
All right, Dana Balter, candidate for the 24th Congressional District. Election Day is November 6th. Tell a friend and take a friend. Thank you, Dana. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much.